it often seems like my favorite analogy is it's like sex education. It's like with teenagers, basically. There's a risk, there's a danger, it's uncomfortable to talk about. Do we talk about it? Or do we pretend that it's not there and see what happens and rolls out? We have, like you said, we have people dying, friends and family, and those of us who have been playing the game for long enough, it gets closer and closer to us, and we lose some of the best people in the world.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And the hardest part of it is that every avalanche death is a preventable avalanche death.
Welcome to the Kooler Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn, and I'm excited to have you join me as I interview community members and business leaders from the communities in which I live, work, and serve through my business Kooler Garage Doors. We're going to bring you highlights on characters in our communities. Why? Because community matters, and I want to know more about who is behind our business and leadership in order to understand and support the community fabric that our relationships make up. And collectively, we can build stronger communities that support our lifestyles, our youth, and our health. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Kooler Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn. Today, I've got my good friend, Andy Sovick with Beacon Guidebooks joining us. I'm so excited for our conversation, Andy. Thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. A pleasure to be here with you, buddy.
Yeah, man. And you're beaming in from the beautiful ice lab.
Yes, the ice lab at Western in beautiful, snowy, wintry Gunnison.
Yeah, today's definitely pumping some snow. How long have you had your office up at the ice lab?
That's a good question. I like to pride myself as the longest standing member of the ice lab, which is sometimes an achievement, and sometimes it's seen as like, wow, you're still at the ice lab, huh? I've been here since it started. I think it was 2015.
Right on.
Maybe 16.
Yeah.
When they started, basically they were opening it. It was part of the business school. For those who aren't familiar with the ice lab, ICE stands for innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And they were looking for businesses who were basically in the startup phase and who could use some help with the incubation, as they called it. And that's exactly what I fit into. And so I joined, and it was basically just a co-working space where there was some extra help with creating a business plan, strategic plan, just seeing what they could do to help. As part of the small business administration branches. So that's how I got here. And so I run a company. I've been in just about every different dedicated office space in this place as we grow. So
that's awesome.
The office space gets bigger and bigger, but I love it up here. Great internet, free kombucha.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to get somebody, maybe David, on and do a show around the podcast or the ice lab specifically. But today we're not here to talk about the ice lab. We're here to talk about you, Andy. Yes.
Okay.
How about start kicking it off? Tell us where you grew up.
So I grew up in Fort Collins, north of Denver. It was actually outside of Fort Collins, in the kind of the countryside, if you will. And that was in the 80s. My parents had moved there maybe 10 years prior as back to the landers, as they like to call themselves. They were part of that whole movement in the 70s where it was, get away from the plastics and the consumerism and all that stuff. And they were reading Mother Jones News and Mother Earth and all that stuff. And so I grew up in a pretty idyllic setting, albeit not financially sound. We had an apple orchard and a big old garden, and it was a wonderful childhood. My sister and I grew up in a lot of hiking, a lot of playing outdoors, a lot of cross country skiing up on Cameron Pass, surrounding areas, and and then we grew up there. Moving a little bit. My dad was a contractor. My mom was a firefighter and a teacher. And I, got into, did kind of the traditional thing, got way into soccer. I played obsessively at, high level of soccer. and was a total music geek throughout high school. I think that might be my some of the stronger themes that came out of childhood. Somewhere in my mid-teens, like 15 years old or something like that, I became obsessed with the idea of becoming a mountain man, a mountain enthusiast, and all things mountain. I got into trapping and skiing and survivalism. I was reading all the survivalist books and experimenting with it up in the mountains with my friend, and I got way into skiing, took a kayaking course, got into rock climbing, just wanted to do all the things and get out there, and became pretty obsessed with that idea, which I think shapes my future pretty well.
Yeah, I love it. What's the story of how you ended up in Gunnison, Crested Butte area?
Yeah, so obviously my attraction to the mountains never ended, and when I left high school, I was immediately drawn to the western slope. I went to Fort Lewis College, and did 4 years there, graduated, and met my soon-to-be wife, Gail, my senior year of college. And she went off to Alaska, and I went backpacking and ski bumming through the Rockies. And we eventually came back together when she got a job at the Crested Butte Academy, which was a private ski academy in Crested Butte in the mid-2000s. Yeah, so she got a job as an art and Spanish teacher, and I basically just followed her as boyfriend. Just was like, that sounds cool, like ski town. You have the job, that's great, She, a theme in our life has been she's much more responsible and, and smart, and she had a job and all that stuff. And I was just into skiing. I just wanted to ski bum and play, and Crested Butte seemed like a great place for that. So I didn't know much about the town, honestly, before we got here. Growing up in Fort Collins and the Front Range, Crested Butte and Gunnison were pretty off the map, honestly. It would show up on like the news channels, and so it was a faraway place as far as I was concerned. And even living in Durango, it's still a dead-end road, and kind of just, even today, it's still kind of in the middle of nowhere, honestly. So it was fairly new to me, and typical story, coming into the valley and realizing it's where we were going to live. We fell in love immediately, and it felt like home right away. We had a pretty quintessential experience where we dropped off of Kebler Pass coming into town it was dirt road at the time, and there was, it so happened to be an Alpenglow. I don't think they called it Alpenglow concert, but it was a Thursday night concert series, July, summer, rainbow coming out of Mount Crested Butte. We're playing Frisbee, and a bunch of other people start playing Frisbee with us in the park, and there's music, and we were like, does this happen every day here in this town? Like, this is crazy. So we fell in love with it right away, and that was in 2005. And I started working as a carpenter right then. Like I said, my dad was a contractor, so I had the skills already, having worked for him in the summers. And it was a building boom at the time, 05 through 08. It was pretty heavy, so it was pretty easy to pick up a job. So
yeah. I love it, man.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Kooler Garage Doors. Just want to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Sommer Garage Door Openers. We believe Sommers are the best in the business when it comes to garage door openers. We always recommend them for residential installs because of the many features they have, such as Wi-Fi connectivity and safety features like a fixed chain that runs along a secure rail for a quiet and safe operation. Click the link to find out more about Sommer Garage Door Openers.
So, Beacon Guidebooks, for those that don't know, I'll explain it, but then I'd love for you to explain it too, Andy, because my understanding is that it's a guidebook that is relatively niched out into backcountry and off-piste ski areas. And I would relate it a little bit to some of the climbing books I've seen, although it's more for mountain, uphill access and downhill runs, with a an intent around snow safety and safe access. Did I hit that about right? What would you add to that?
That sounds pretty good. And I mean, or just to even back it up, it's just a publishing company, really. And I didn't know that when I started it. I didn't even know what a publishing company was. So, but that is what it is. We help authors who are experts in their field of knowledge and in their zone. We help them get their project to the deadline, to the finish line. And then the publishing, what it means to publish is basically help the project management side of it, and then help the printing, the processing, the distribution, shipping, marketing, sales, and all that side of it, warehousing. That's being a publisher. So honestly, at the time when I started the company, I didn't know what a publisher was. I was just making books.
Yeah.
And so it's like a carpenter realizing he's called a carpenter and all he wanted to do was build houses. So there's a name to it. But yeah, that's essentially what we do. We work with authors and experts. A lot of times it's a professional mountain guide who is extremely familiar with their area. And they've been teaching courses, Avalanche courses. They've been showing people around the mountains, showing clients, and they have an extremely large breadth of knowledge and wisdom to share. And a lot of times they're just looking at a guidebook as a way to kind of create a legacy out of their knowledge and wisdom. Sometimes they just want that resource for their own company. The resource being a photographic guidebook, map, and app, so that they can show people the best way to get around the mountains.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what we do, is we help them facilitate their product. If a mountain guide wants that product, they don't want to be a publisher. They want to keep being a mountain guide. They need help getting this book finished. They don't want to deal with warehousing thousands of books. They don't want to deal with marketing it and events and selling ads, stuff like that, maintaining a website, all the stuff that we do.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's our role.
I like that. How did this start? Like, what's the why behind it?
You know, because you're my friend and we've been talking about this since the day the idea was created. However, I'll explain it to everybody else. I'm an obsessive skier, backcountry skier in the Crested Butte area. Before we moved to Crested Butte, I was way into it, and moving here, it felt like a whole new frontier, a place I had never explored before. And one of my favorite elements of backcountry skiing is the exploration side of it, looking for places where no one's been, and looking just beyond the next rise and seeing what's over there, which is of course a risky activity. We deal with avalanches in one of the most severe ways in Colorado. We have one of the most notoriously bad snowpacks when it comes to avalanches, meaning there's other places like the West Coast and northern mountains that have a more stable snowpack. In general, avalanche deaths and accidents happen wherever there's snow and mountains, but Colorado has one of the highest rates. So anyway, it's a risky activity. However, it's one of my favorite activities. And I guess I just have a bit of a categorical organizational brain. And every time I ski, before there was GPS, I just was writing it down, recording it, drawing it on our paper maps, and taking photos. Whenever I was on a ridge, I'd look over to the other ridge across the valley and I'd say, wow, I wonder what that's like to ski. And I'd take a couple photos and I'd organize that. And so after many years of skiing here, showing my photos to friends and using them for planning, I said, this is a really excellent resource. There should be something like this for every area. There should be something like this for our area. I could use this for Crested Butte. And it wasn't it was not an inventing of the wheel by any means. There's been a ski atlas in the Tetons. It's just a photographic paper atlas for a bunch of the ski zones, backcountry ski zones near Jackson Hole Resort. Right. And I had taken inspiration from that. And a friend of mine made one just on the west side of the Tetons. He made a cool photographic ski atlas for the Targhee backcountry on the west side of the Tetons. And when he made that, it all clicked for me. His name is Brady Johnston, and he was a college friend and an amazing skier, super cool guy, and an amazing businessman. And he made that, and of course, sold a couple hundred copies and was able to buy himself a pair of skis. So it wasn't a huge business venture. And this is around 2010, and which wasn't that long ago, but backcountry skiing was much less popular in 2010 than it is today. It's been a rapid shift in demographics and population.
Yeah.
So I made one for Crested Butte, long story short. Took a flight in an airplane, took a bunch of aerial photos, and put it into a book. This was on the side as a side hustle and just a little fun project. At the same time, we were buying and remodeling a house in Gunnison, and we had a baby. So I wasn't sleeping anyway, so why not pick up a side project, right? And printed 1,000 or 2,000, I can't exactly remember, and started selling them at local shops and made a little website, and that's where it started.
Yeah. I love it. What is, so, we mentioned a safety component, and I think avalanches are unique in the sense that it's equitable. A novice has risk. A really experienced backcountry snow scientist has risks. And if we've been in this community long enough, we've had friends and loved ones that have had their lives taken by avalanches. With the popularity of off-piste backcountry and some of the technologies and potentially making it a little easier and perceptively safer, the guidebooks, has that been a welcomed resource in the community? Have there been pushback on, oh my gosh, don't give this information out because this will bring more people into the danger zones? What's been the reception that you've received over the years?
The reception has been everything. So and you touched on it pretty well. In one way, we're sharing backcountry ski zones, which has by and large been a bit of a secret to a lot of the backcountry ski community. And a lot of times it feels like a secret. When you're up on a mountain and there's no one else out there, and it's Wednesday and you feel like you earned it because you did, it's very uncomfortable when a bunch of other people come up who you feel like didn't earn it, come up the mountain. And a lot of us have to step back a little bit and see how it is what the privileges are that we were given that got us up into the mountain in the first place, and to what level did we earn it. And then also we have to recognize that it's public land that we're on, that information is usually good.
Yeah.
And knowledge is power. And it's uncomfortable, especially, those of us who grew up in Colorado with the population was less than half of what it is right now. We've been, maybe we're just accustomed and numb to it. But people have been, more and more people get in the backcountry every day. And my view on the sharing of the secrecy of it, on the discomfort of more people coming into the backcountry is, and this will segue into the avalanche information side of what we do. It often seems like my favorite analogy is it's like sex education. It's like with teenagers, basically. There's a risk, there's a danger, it's uncomfortable to talk about. Do we talk about it? Or do we pretend that it's not there and see what happens and rolls out? We have, like you said, we have people dying, friends and family, and those of us who have been playing the game for long enough. It gets closer and closer to us, and we lose some of the best people in the world.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, and the hardest part of it is that every avalanche death is a preventable avalanche death. It's inherently risky activity, but it doesn't have to be base jumping risky at all. Most of the accidents that we see, they're recorded accidents, and we try to investigate what happened and what were the ingredients that went into that accident. It's usually a lapse in decision making by someone who had the tools to make the right decisions. It's oftentimes people who are experienced and have the training and have the tools and the knowledge, and they made a bad decision. And that really motivates us at Beacon and in the Avalanche community to figure out what it is we can do to reduce that problem.
Yeah.
So back to the sex education analogy, we have some very important things to talk about with terrain in backcountry skiing. And we can either try to keep it a secret and just hope it plays out really well, or we realize we can have a captive audience with the guidebook and really talk about what needs to be talked about to help people make better decisions. So what we do in Beacon Guidebooks is we focus much less on the guidance of going out there and getting out there, going to the trailhead and getting to the summit. We certainly pay some attention to that, but we keep things as brief as possible in our books. So very few sentences, very few words. The editing process with our authors is heavy. We spend a lot of time taking 5 paragraphs and boiling it down into 2 sentences. And what we spend more time on is visual cues and terrain analysis. Basically, with Avalanche education and Avalanche, the recipe for an avalanche. So most people are familiar with the recipe for fire. To have fire, you need air, you need a spark, and you need fuel. If you don't have one of those ingredients, then you don't have a fire. Same for avalanches. You need snowpack is one of the ingredients. Weather is another ingredient, and then terrain. Now these 2 ingredients, snowpack and weather, those are dynamic. They're changing constantly. They're changing as we speak outside right now.
Yeah.
The one fixed element is terrain. And so you have to have the right type of terrain to have an avalanche and to have an avalanche accident. So simply put, if it's steep enough to slide, then it will slide. If it was that simple, then we wouldn't need to write a guidebook, but there's a lot of complexities and intricacies to terrain. And one of my favorite ways to explain the terrain is, instead of writing 5 pages about how this mountains would behave in an avalanche, we just take a picture. So at Beacon Guidebooks, we take aerial photos of every single backcountry ski run that we talk about, and that aerial photo demonstrates the subtleties, the complexities, and intricacies of that terrain. And so if you've taken a level 1 avalanche course, which hopefully you have if you're going into the backcountry, you're often told that terrain is a big piece and that you need to understand your terrain. You need to wrap your head around it and understand how it relates to the snowpack. So if you have a very weak snowpack, meaning if there's a really weak point underneath the snow that might fail underneath a heavy slab of snow, then it's important to know what kind of terrain you should be traveling on or should not be traveling on that day when that snow is really bad. Or if the weather is warming really fast, then that might heat up the snow so much that it actually starts to slide downhill, and you need to understand the terrain. Once again, just aspect being the directional side of the terrain. Is it south facing? If it's south facing and you're in the northern hemisphere, then it's going to heat up faster than north facing. So every piece of terrain we demonstrate in the books talks about that aspect. It talks about that slope angle, and then it talks about terrain traps. Terrain traps being places where the consequences are increased for a skier who's caught in an avalanche. So if you are in an avalanche and you're just on a big open slope on a glacier, that's a lot different than you're caught in an avalanche and you end up in a gully. It's a terrain trap. So we talk about terrain traps, and of course, most importantly, we talk about alternatives and what your options are for getting up and down this mountain without getting into those increased consequence areas. And that's the skinny of it. We've come up with so many tools since then to talk about terrain. There's really cool classification systems that we've been working with. We've learned a lot of ways to talk about it. We thought one way was going to work really well, and we realized that the backcountry ski audience and community wasn't resonating with them, and so we found different ways. And so after we're at 11 years now with this company, and we've learned a lot, and we're still making and innovating and finding better ways to explain the terrain side of the avalanche puzzle.
Yeah. I love the innovation, and, I believe from what I've seen, like the receptivity of listening to the community and tweaking things, right, to make sure that messages are landing with the right audience in the right way. Because, humans have always found the risk, whether it's with sex education or Avalanche or rock climbing or driving, like there's some component of humanism that will kind of push the boundary. And backcountry skiing is certainly one of those, and there's tons of variables. And I love the educational, the informative perspective of your guidebooks. Also, for anybody listening that hasn't seen your guidebooks, like, you have amazing photos and an amazing design to the guidebooks. And I think it lays out information in a really entertaining, engaging, and certainly useful way. So kudos to you and your team for building that resource. Looking forward, Andy, what are we excited for? What's coming down the chute?
Oh man, the steamroller of backcountry skiing is only picking up every year. COVID really created a big influx in the backcountry, and a lot of people turned to the outdoors and the outdoor industry in general. Backcountry skiing is part of that. People felt like the resorts were getting a little bit too crowded. Of course, regulations made them start looking beyond the gates and the ropes, and that really spiked our company a lot. And now what I'm doing is growing as fast as I possibly can. My wife, Gail, has jumped onto the business a year and a half ago. She handles most of the administrative side of things, bookkeeping, the website, basically just keeping things running so that I can keep making books, which is my favorite, making books and maps.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite part of the puzzle. So she's been an amazing resource. She's really cleaned our whole system up, and I owe a lot of our success to her now and our ability to grow. What I'm looking forward to is we have over a dozen products coming out in 2023 in the fall, and we're expanding beyond Colorado and Washington, which is where we're mainly focused right now. So we have 9 zones covered throughout Colorado and 6 zones covered throughout Washington. And this next year, we're going to have products in California, Oregon, New Mexico, Montana, Wyoming, and another one in Colorado, 2 more in Colorado as well. So that's on top of our Avalanche Rescue guidebook as well, which isn't so much a photographic guidebook, but a informational resource and compendium of all the things you need to know if you're part of a rescue team, if the worst case does happen. So medical, searching, extraction, team management, patient management, mental health crises afterwards, all those things are in this really cool field book that we've made as well.
Beautiful.
So we're looking forward to all those things. What I really get excited about, and I get geeky about it, and it's probably not worth a full podcast episode at all, is the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale, which is a scale that we've been working with for 6 years now, but it's going to be really taking off in the U.S. this year with our partner Onyx Maps. And we've been figuring out a way to classify that avalanche terrain that we were talking about. Basically, put each type of terrain into a box, into a category, and that's going to be a 5-point scale from 0 to 4. 0 being where I'm sitting in the office right now, which is not an avalanche terrain whatsoever, and 4 being extreme terrain. And if we can take every backcountry run that we have in our guidebooks and beyond, and we can put them into a category that really helps people make decisions for the day. In other words, if the danger rating is considerable today, and you've learned that considerable danger means you should stay out of level 3 avalanche terrain, then that really helps you make a good decision for the day. Someone in your group hopefully will say, hey, it's considerable danger today. We've all been taught in our level 1 class to stay out of level 3 terrain. So that's what we're really excited about.
I love that. Andy, for listeners that want to learn more, that want to get in touch, find the guidebook, where are the resources for them to go?
There's a visual right behind me.
Nice. BeaconGuidebooks.com.
www.beaconguidebooks. BeaconGuidebooks.com. So it's quite easy to find. We have not only our whole e-com store is up online, but we have lots of information, all that stuff I just started talking about, AITS, Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale. We have a whole webpage dedicated to that, lots of other resources, and it explains the why and our whole team. I couldn't do it without our team of authors, our incredible graphic designer, our photographers, and printing companies. We have a very incredible family of people that help get this to the finish line. I'm just one cog in the wheel.
Yeah. I love it, man. I really appreciate, our friendship is awesome. You're an incredible human. The resource that you've been developing over the years, I've been a part of just observing that journey. I think it's incredible. And so huge shout out to you and your team for providing this educational, informational resource. And, for the listeners, it is about making better decisions. And I think on a future podcast, maybe it's you, Andy, maybe we get a panel, but to talk about the decision-making, like the psychology of a decision-making, is also an incredible component of traveling in the backcountry in ways that, are healthy and safe, right? And I use safe with quotes around it because none of it's truly safe, but through the decision-making, through utilizing tools like this Beacon Guidebooks, it's just better information can help make better decisions.
Yeah, and it's not just a way to cope with being in the backcountry and doing a risky activity. I'll point out it's having this practice of decision making in a risky situation translates to the rest of life. It's a practice, and we're businessmen. We take risks every day, and sometimes they're high risk, sometimes they're low risk, and the more you practice making risks and understanding the consequences of them before you make them, the better off you are. And this goes with, once again, back to sex education, back to driving cars, back to substance use. Everything we do is risky. Nothing is safe. Living is risky and dangerous. And this is just one exercise to really help us hone those skills and teach our kids and our community, and hopefully we can all make better decisions no matter what we're doing.
I love it, man. Can we find Beacon Guidebooks in social media?
Oh yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook. And once again, just Beacon Guidebooks, super easy to find. And you can see our partners there as well. We publish we make guidebooks, we make maps. Of course, we work with two different apps. One is called Rackup, RAKKUP, and the other is Onyx Maps and Backcountry.
Awesome.
And we're pretty easy to find these days. So
awesome. We'll include your website, social links in our show notes. So listeners, if you're interested, definitely check out the resource. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you. Thanks for doing this, and glad to be here.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right.